Riverdale sometimes deals with disturbing and problematic topics. We provided a list of content warnings in the episode description. Hello and welcome to Dead Ends. I'm Emily.
I'm Brenton.
And we have 2 new episodes of Riverdale Season 1 for you as our final episode for 2024.
That's right.
And then, assuming women are still allowed to speak in public, I will be back with Brenton in 2025. If not, Brenton will be doing the podcast alone.
Or as an act of rebellion.
That's true. That's true.
We are talking about Riverdale to stick it to the man.
Okay, but so honestly, like as a woman and like women and girls' joy, like there's a lot of things that we like. People make fun of things like Riverdale because it was like 4 girls and 4 women. Riverdale is so much more than that. Pretty Little Liars definitely was not given the space it should have been because it was 4 girls. Whereas like a show like that, 4 boys. There's a lot of air quotes going on for those of you that aren't watching the videos.
You're doing a good job putting in your voice.
Using the emphasis. Thank you. But there's a lot of shows, the 4 boys that we expect girls to watch, but not vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I read I was going to say the Harry Potter books, but then I was like, I don't want to talk about Harry Potter. It just hurts my feelings because the whole thing went to shit and J.K. Rowling's a horrible person. But an example of books are Henry and Mudge. You read lots of books as a girl that are about boys, and then if boys have to read a single book about girls, it's as if like the world is on fire.
Yeah, we're not forced to or carried to, and it's actively discouraged.
I made Brenton read books about girls that I read as a child, as an adult.
Yes, I did not read Little Princess. Although Matilda is like one I could see could like fall in there since it's like a rolled doll thing, but
you didn't read it, did you?
I didn't read it.
Because it was about a girl.
Yeah, probably.
And Matilda is an excellent book, at least, for me and of that time. And there's...
Yeah, we all... It is impossible to untangle the Roald Dahl books from Roald Dahl himself, but we can agree that,
yes,
got some good books.
Yes.
Don't rest in peace. Anyways, but we are not going to have an episode next week, which is why we are saying last episode of 2024.
Yes, so enjoy your new year.
And also, happy holidays. And for those of you who also celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas Eve.
Merry Christmas Eve. I hope your family is not driving you insane yet.
Yeah.
If you drink, I wish you a nice bottle of champagne. If you don't drink, I wish you a nice Advil.
I like that. That's good.
Thank you. I just thought about what I would need in this moment.
You're like, ooh.
Oh, they're all stressing me out.
Mm-hmm. Pain relief.
If you are allergic to cats and your parents have cats at home or a cat, I wish you a lot of good allergy medicine. Maybe not Benadryl. Makes you sleepy.
Yeah, it makes me very sleepy.
Yeah. I've been recommended to take other things from my allergist now, but obviously speak with your own doctors. I'm not a doctor. But I think it's important to share that information because the access to medicine is very expensive. But you take your allergy pills and don't pet the cat. Looking at Brenton. He is allergic to cats. We both are.
I love cats.
And he pets them all the time.
It's really bad. I'm really allergic.
He's I'm allergic, but he's like immediately eyes go watery, like puffy face. And I'm like, you're going to die.
It's really
He's
bad.
like, it's okay. They're so cute. And I'm
they
like,
are really cute.
Yeah, but when you're dead, you can't pet cats.
Yeah. And they know I'm allergic. The cats know. They just immediately start coming up to me and start
Or do they
hanging.
just know you're a sucker?
Both.
Like they're like,
Maybe.
oh, he'll pet me. Because like I have to kind of be standoffish, which I feel bad about. But I would like to not have hives.
That's true. That's true.
Because I get hives.
Yeah. So.
Anyway.
Yeah, we got some great episodes of Riverdale this week.
Honestly, episode 4 is one of the best episodes thus far. Mm-hmm. I mean.
Out of 5.
Out of
it's
5.
It's my number 1.
Yeah.
I was thinking of that earlier. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's the best episode. But then, limited sample.
But then, because I know where it goes, I'm like, damn, this is so good. Yep. What happens? We should change the name of the podcast from Dead Ends to What Happens.
Well, you get to go on this journey. Maybe we'll all feel differently.
Yeah, maybe we'll like it more.
Exactly.
Or like it different. Let me rephrase, because I do enjoy parts of it, but it gets to where you enjoy Pretty Little Liars parts of it, Right now, this is actually like a good show.
Yeah. No, it's so good. And I think you pointed this out with like Betty, but it's like so good at like bringing in these like fully formed characters.
Yes, they are fully developed characters. Sorry, I cut you off.
No.
Oh, I assumed I cut you off, but then you didn't. You had stopped.
I just kind of trailed off. I didn't put a period.
But they're fully developed. Like Betty, which I mean, they come from Archie comics. They are these fully formed characters, but obviously they're changed in the show. And their aesthetics and their personality have changed, which Brenton will get into the visual and aesthetic in a minute. But I think, like, for example, with Betty, like one of the big things is that Betty works on cars with her dad, and Betty is a perfectionist and is trying to be this perfect child while also like fighting that. Like, it's a very relatable thing where you're like, oh, I want to be perfect and I want to present myself as perfect, but I don't actually want to be perfect. Like, I want to be a person.
Yeah.
And I think that's really beautiful. Even like Veronica, like they just have like all these interests. Like Archie's got multiple interests. Veronica's got multiple interests. Cheryl's got
a whole hell of a lot of baggage.
And like the most amazing vibe.
Well, even Jughead, I think what makes episode 4 so effective is it's all showing. Right? It's using the medium of just giving you everything you need to know about Jughead's background. He's so attached to the drive-in. We understand that like how much he likes things. He's forgotten in more ways than one because no one really gives a shit. Not that nobody gives a shit about him, but he's not protected in the same way, and nobody even has the same interest in him, much like the drive-in that's dilapidating and falling apart. And, you know, it gives you the nice rug pull at the end where he's living there, and then also the sketchy person that you've been seeing the entire time is his father. So it's this really nice, like, reveal and change there, and tells you a lot about Jughead himself without having to give you, like, a whole lesson about him.
Yes, it's a really like it's a masterclass in I think character storytelling. I really think this is really well done.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I had one more, but I lost it. It's okay. It'll come back. When you love something, you set it free.
That's right. Well, we'll rope it back in, and in the meantime, we'll move over to our cast. So, as Emily mentioned, we have a visual component this week. So I decided that we should show the Archie Comics characters along with our cast here.
Oh my god, the difference.
So I think that's the greatest one to start on. So F.P. Jones. I don't know if we actually got his name this week,
but we know it's F.P. Jones.
Yeah.
And if you hear us refer to him as finger pointing Jones, it's because every time FP talks, he's like pointing at somebody. There's a lot of pointing, and so
he even does it to. I don't think in the scene with Hermione, but you see him in the background doing this.
I believe we got that like off of what someone said online at some point during this time, like when it was happening. I don't think we coined that. I think it was part of but I can't remember the first time we heard it. I just know that in my head, we've always called him finger pointing Jones.
An all-time character. We'll get more. F.P. Jones is just amazing. And I think Skeet Ulrich does such a good job with just like the limited screen time. So let's jump into Skeet Ulrich because we're going to be talking a lot about his life because it's like, oh my God, you have lived a life, sir. His real name's Brian Ray Trout. Skeet was his nickname when he was in Little League because his coach called him that because he was small and fast as a mosquito. Gotta love it. His last name is actually taken from his stepdad, who was the NASCAR driver and team owner D.K. Ulrich, who he considers his dad because his dad was not in his life after, I think, like age 9. He said at like age 6, his parents were divorced and his dad kidnapped him and his brother for 3 years.
I was always really afraid of that happening to me as a child.
Because
it's a thing that happens.
Yeah, it's scary.
I mean, I don't think I was actually at risk of being kidnapped by my bio dad, but like it was something you heard about and it was like, oh, that's like that was believable because I mean, it does happen.
Right. Exactly. A certain type of man who feels entitled, or a certain person who feels entitled to their children will just like, exactly, vulnerable kids, and spent 3 years moving from Florida to New York with him. His mom owns the event marketing agency Sports Management Group, But also, just to relate it back also to other NASCAR things, his maternal uncle is NASCAR driver Ricky Rudd, and his maternal grandfather was Alvin Ray Rudd Sr., president of Al Rudd Auto Parts. So NASCAR, it just flowing, gasoline thrown through their veins. But he was known for 90s movies, so Scream specifically. I don't know if I've ever seen all of Scream. I've seen bits and pieces, and I know a lot about Scream without having actually seen it. Because it appealed to me because it's like, oh, it's like about horror movies kind of thing, but while being one, it's like commenting on it. He was also in The Craft, which we've been meaning to watch.
We've been meaning
forever.
to watch that, yeah.
And as good as it gets. Oof. And then also, I wrote this down. He starred in the show Jericho, which I remember being a Lost-alike from like 2006 when they were trying to find the next Lost.
Oh.
It's like a post-apocalypse thing. So there you go. We'll be getting more of F.P. Jones soon. Next slide. On to Kevin Keller, played by Casey Cott. So I mentioned this, I think, maybe on the first episode, but Kevin Keller was the first openly gay Archie Comics character introduced in 2010. So Casey went to BU originally, but transferred to Carnegie Mellon to study acting, graduated in 2016. During his senior years when he landed Riverdale. Began acting in local Ohio theater and eventually moved to Pittsburgh for school and was doing theater there. And so made his Broadway debut as Christian. I don't remember who that is in Moulin Rouge. Oh, wait, I haven't seen Moulin Rouge. So that's why I don't know who the hell Christian is. I was confusing it with Chicago in my head.
Oh.
In 2023. So good for him. Was apparently also in the Sabrina Carpenter music video for Y in 2017. There you go. So, yeah. Casey Cott, everybody. And we'll move through the next two, I think, pretty quick here. So Gerald and Grundy. So
yeah, they really changed that one up.
Right. So in the one of the trivias on the fandom was that Geraldine Grundy, it's like, oh, because in the episode, it's like the only Geraldine Grundy I could find is like this retired, like octogenarian. And so that Geraldine Grundy is the teacher in Archie Comics and is like older. And like, so it's not that same thing at all. So I think it's funny that they played with that she's actually not Geraldine Grundy and was like taking her name. But this is Sarah Habel. I think we mentioned her last time, maybe a movie ago. Her movie debut was in the movie Whip It. I never saw Whip It, but do you remember Whip It?
No.
It's the roller derby movie that Drew Barrymore directed that starred Elliot Page.
Yes, I do remember Whip It.
Yeah. I never saw it. I remember thinking, it's probably a fun time. Also, Hostel Part 3. No, thank you. Small roles in CSI New York, Cold Case. Was also in an episode of Party Down. So to connect it back to, I had to look up the episode because I'm like, I don't remember Party Down all that well. But Party Down was created by was created by Rob Thomas, who also created Veronica Mars. We covered Veronica Mars, and the episode she was in was where they were supposed to cater Steve Gutenberg's birthday party, but he ends up not having the birthday party, so they end up just like hanging out at his house, acting out. Martin, oh God, what's his last name? He's from Freaks and Geeks and Silicon Valley. I forget it, but he's like the nerdy character on there who writes like some sci-fi script, so they act out his script.
I don't remember that one at all.
Yeah, I barely remember it.
I don't remember a lot of Party Down.
Yeah, but essentially she comes with, I'm losing all the names today. He's also in Veronica Mars, blonde guy that Christian Bell's friends with in real life.
Oh, I can't remember his name either. Ryan something?
Yes. Oh boy, I'll have to look both these up because this is struggling. Reason I was connected these back to is that Steve Gutenberg is also in Veronica Mars throughout season 2 because he's the mayor. And I'm going to leave it at that for people who haven't seen Veronica Mars. So anyways, we'll say hello to Sarah Habel and goodbye. Jason Blossom, played
Ryan
by
Hansen.
There you go. Thank you for solving that for me.
You're welcome.
I thought this comic panel was hilarious. So
this was my other thought was about Cheryl. It's from the beginning. Cheryl's speaking pattern and cadence and the way she speaks, and that's all. It was the same thing 3 times. Which
reiterate it.
Jesus Christ, we're doing really well today. But
we're both a little tired.
From the very beginning, Cheryl has her personality and speaks in a very specific way that is like not of this time.
Hmm.
And I think it gets a little more extreme as the show goes on, but for the most part, she's already anchored in that. Like
Yeah,
she's
that's
already there.
Uh-huh. And talk about a performance of just like absolutely nailing this character with a voice right out the gate.
Right out the gate. And the only thing I notice, she has like more and more of her red lip as these episodes go on. And at a certain point, you will never see Cheryl without a red lip. I feel like it just, she becomes so synonymous with like the bright red lip.
Yeah, I think you're gonna. Yeah, I'd be surprised if like in later seasons we ever see her with that one. But not really getting much of a speaking role in this is Trevor Stines's Jason Blossom. It feature film debut in the Amityville Terror, one of those Amityville like direct video horror movies, kind of they've done here, and some kind of smaller roles in smaller films. And finally, Valerie Brown is played by Haley Law. So I also included a picture of Valerie Brown, the character that I would know. I'm like, oh, that's from the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. I'm like, of course I know Valerie Brown. Immediately recognized her. The very first black character in Archie comics. I think it was in 1969. But Haley also had a recurring role in the cyberpunk Netflix series Altered Carbon. That was like kind of a big thing in like 2018 when it launched. I think it's about like being able to like take different bodies, like kind of futuristic sci-fi thing.
Oh.
But also has a EP of music. I'm assuming it's Hayleu. It's Hayleau from 2016.
Very cool.
So there you go. There's our actors for the week.
I like the PowerPoint. That was pretty.
Thank you.
It's fun.
Yeah, I think it's fun seeing the characters. I mean, a lot of them you're just like, okay, 1-to-1. But then you get F.P. Jones where he's balding. All right, are we ready?
Well, not a Southside Serpent.
Exactly.
That is not a Southside Serpent.
We'll learn all about the Southside Serpents in this episode, won't we?
I am so excited about the Southside Serpents.
It's really good. Oh, well, let's get to it. Chapter 4, The Last Picture Show. A week after Jason's body was found, Jughead's narration mentions the Twilight Drive-In where he works is closing down. Riverdale is slowly becoming more paranoid as like neighbors are all kind of like jumping on down each other's throats and keeping an eye on him. Betty writes in her diary that she thinks that Grundy and Archie could have been down at Sweetwater River together. Archie and Fred attend Grundy's recital in the park. They compliment her performance and bring her flowers. Fred invites her out to dinner with them to thank her for helping Archie, and both her and Archie are like, Jughead vents to Kevin, Betty, and Veronica about the drive-in closing. And then Kevin eventually tells him to stop referencing Tarantino. I love that. Whenever they do this, it's like, oh, this is a very specific type of film nerd. No one cares about the drive-in at all, and Veronica keeps talking about how no one cares. An anonymous buyer apparently bought the drive-in, and then Veronica's like, well, why would they have to remain anonymous? Like, who cares? He tells them to all come to the closing. They're going to do like one last movie, and they go around like trying to name different movies, and eventually Betty says Rebel Without a Cause, and Jughead's like, yeah. Cheryl at a different booth talks trash about Hermione working at Pops, and she wouldn't have invited Veronica to join the Vixens if she knew that her mom was a waitress. Cheryl makes a scene when Hermione comes to take her bill. She literally goes like, I'm gonna like, don't you even think about like taking some of that money for yourself? Like essentially insinuating that she's gonna like take it from her. It's like, oh my God. 1, racist. 2, classist. But Hermione is like, what are you little shit, and shuts her down. Fred, Archie, and Grundy come in, and Betty rushes over to talk to him alone and takes him outside. She tells him about her theory and asks if he was with Grundy on July 4th. He's like, did Jughead tell you? And she's like, Jughead knows? This is classic, like, you know, you don't, like, give up, like, on the immediate thing. You know what I mean? But Betty's just asking questions. Veronica's like, I bet they're out there talking about me, and gets up to go outside. Kevin wonders aloud what it was like before she arrived.
No, he says specifically that he can't remember what their lives were like before Veronica arrived, which is the funniest fucking thing in the world.
This opening is hilarious. Like, this opening of them in Pops is so fucking funny.
It's so well written.
Archie comes clean to Betty as Veronica comes up and overhears. Betty calls it illegal, and Veronica agrees. Alice pulls up and tells Betty to get in the car. She grills her about hanging out with them, and they drive off. Later, Betty writes in her diary and looks up Grundy on Sleuthster. Cheryl outside, Pops sees Hermione talking to a serpent, a gang member, but we know this is FP Jones.
With a finger point.
Mm-hmm. Right, he's doing this. Near the dumpster outside Pops and takes a photo of them. The next day, Jughead passes out flyers for the drive-in, and Archie makes sure that Betty won't write about him in the paper. Jughead says Betty probably wouldn't hurt you, probably, and tries to reason with him about Grundy. It's like, this dude, like, she's taking you for a ride, and not the one you want. Archie wants them to stay together. Betty interviews Grundy for the Blue and Gold, asks her about her past teaching experience, Archie's independent study, and then learns that she apparently did an independent study with Jason. Betty asks if she thought he was cute, and she's like, well, I don't think of my students that way. Cheryl talks down about Hermione to Veronica to cement her at the top of the social hierarchy. Veronica asks why she's being like this, and Cheryl tells her about her mom talking to FP, who we don't. I'm just going to refer to him as FP because we know him.
But none of the kids do.
Exactly. We don't get that reveal until the end.
It's telling because they've all gone to school with Jughead.
Mm-hmm.
But Cheryl wouldn't care.
Right. She wouldn't actually say.
Jughead is not, part of the conversation.
No. He is not on her radar. He is too poor. Kevin tells her about the gang. The Southside Serpents, that is. Veronica asks Hermione about the serpent, and she tells her that she grew up with people who joined the serpents, and she was just being polite. She wasn't arguing and isn't in any trouble, and when have I ever lied to you, Veronica? Jughead asks the mayor about saving the drive-in, but she's like, it's become a cesspool. Jughead tells about how his family would go there growing up, and it's like his home. And then she doesn't buy it. Betty shows Archie and Veronica her file on Grundy. Her LinkedIn and Facebook were only opened a year ago. Archie tries to get her to back off because he knows Grundy. Betty says he doesn't know anything about her. Archie tells her to let this go, and Betty eventually agrees. Archie and Grundy watch a movie later. This is part of the old-timey... He sets up a projector, instead of being the drive-in. But there's this certain thing of... We actually mentioned it more probably in PLL than we have in this one so far. Of the kind of out-of-timeness. It's it's modern, but a lot of the things are still... there's little touches of old-timey things of the drive-in kind of more 50s sort of thing, even though it's on the way out. The projector, it's a little bit less heavy-handed here, but there's lots of old Americana kind of scattered around and old technology. There is a lot of cell phones and things here, but it's just kind of a little bit of out-of-timiness. And
I also think that has to do with the poverty level of the area. I think there's
a working class town.
You maintain more older technology, and technology from that time is repairable.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of the things we buy now are not as fixable, or not as intuitive to fix, or we aren't trained, or we don't have the skills to fix them. Whereas
things are meant to break now.
I think about we have a KitchenAid that we got from your grandmother that was built in the 90s, and all the parts, it's all metal, all the parts are replaceable. And I know people who've bought newer ones that you can buy the parts, but it's not worth it. It gets to be more expensive.
Yeah.
And we haven't had to replace anything.
Mm-mm.
I don't think your grandparents did either.
No. And I think that's a really good point.
This is a random example. And that's from the 90s. That's not even older than that. I think about too, everyone had garage fridges that was you know what I mean? The old refrigerator that still ran, but you put it in the garage because you got a nice one for in the house.
Mm-hmm. The open top. Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't necessarily have a fancy fridge, so that we did have an outside fridge at one point. So I don't know where that had came from, but I think about that, and those fridges lasted forever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now, I doubt people are able to do that with a fridge you bought in 2005.
No, because they want you to replace it.
I don't know that because I don't own a home, so I've never bought a refrigerator personally.
Well, just the arc of technology and things, right? Instant Pot is too good of a thing that it literally cratered the business. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love our Instant Pot.
They lost a ton of stock value. I think they had to declare bankruptcy because they pretty much sold to the entire market because they had such a good product.
Yeah.
So you incentivize not to do that.
Or at least to make something on it that breaks, the little pan that goes inside of it or something. You want to have something that people will keep buying. You meaning corporations and in this hellscape that we live in, not as in the individual.
Not in our nice little town of Riverdale that's going through a rough time.
Exactly. And then Cheryl, I feel like it's more old school because that's old money. Like that's
Yes.
it's so there's the two different versions of it. It's like you do things traditionally. You have
Right.
this very specific thing. Whereas Veronica kind of brings in like the fresh new, not necessarily new money though she is, but like the more modern socialite.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, because I was from the city, and no, that's true. No, that's a really good point.
Thank you.
Okay, so Archie and Grundy are watching a movie. He asks about her life. She graduated Juilliard, but it didn't pan out for her to go like be in a symphony or anything. He asks about their future, and she's like, I have no idea, but like tells him to just focus on the present, and that's enough. Betty and Veronica break into Grundy's car. Betty's like, I know about cars because I work on them with my dad.
And Grundy has an old car.
Yes, and so they're easy to break into. Veronica asks why she's doing it, and Betty says it's not because I still like him, it's because he's under her spell. They find a lockbox, and Betty uses a bobby pin to break it open. They find a driver's license for her for Grundy under a different name, Jennifer Gibson, and a gun. Archie arrives home to find Betty and Veronica waiting outside.
Which Betty touches with her bare hands, and then later Alice touches with her bare hands.
Just in her drawer. They tell him about what they found. They both think she could have killed Jason. Archie doesn't want to face it and goes inside his house. Archie comes up and he's like, stop this witch hunt. This is crazy. And Betty's like, it's not a witch hunt and it's not crazy. Holds a beat. We were just in Grundy's car. Jughead appeals to Fred to save the drive-in because his construction company is the one that's going to tear it down. And he's like, I can't stop it. We also find out that Jughead's dad used to work for Fred, but was caught taking materials and was fired. Hermione visits the mayor and gives her a bag of cash as a donation to her campaign, and Lodge Industries gets to have the drive-in on the down low. Archie is at Grundy's looking mad, and she wonders what's wrong, and he asks about her name. She looks shocked, so he asks her what's going on, and she tells him her background, that she was married to an abusive man and was finally able to escape. Kevin finds his dad has set up a murder board at their house. His dad wonders why he hasn't found a nice guy yet to settle down with and tells him not to cruise the woods at night. It's dangerous. Don't go cruising, Kevin.
It's so good.
It's every now and then where they talk about like cruising. It's just like,
why?
Why?
Why was this a plot line?
Was this like talked? Was this written by like straight people? It's like, oh, those gay men always going out cruising.
I don't really understand.
but there's, I know it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny. Alice and Hal visit Fred to tell him that Betty and Archie should not hang out together. Fred says Archie's a good kid, and Allison's like, well, I see him sneaking out of your house at all hours of the night. And Fred's like, are you spying on us? Archie tells Betty about Grundy, and Betty is sorry about that, but tells him that she's cutting him off from everybody in his life, and like, what's actually best for Grundy? And Archie's like, I'll deal with it on my terms. Hermione tells her butler Smithers that Fred will escort her to the drive-in event tonight. Alice puts away Betty's clothes in her drawer and finds Grundy's gun. She grabs Betty's diary and reads through it. Betty comes home to find that her mom is going wild and tells her to get in the car. The drive-in hosts the finale event with Rebel Without a Cause playing. Kevin and Veronica enjoy the movie in a truck bed when Cheryl literally pulls up in her car, gets out, and climbs in the truck bed. She literally says, make room, outcasts. Fred and Hermione enjoy the movie and go down memory lane. Hermione gets text that makes her upset, so she makes an excuse to go get popcorn. As she leaves, Alice approaches from the other side and bangs on the car window and says, it's about the kids. I'm sorry to interrupt your adultery, Fred. Serpents are making a bunch of noise and that annoy Kevin, who turns around and shushes them. He locks eyes with one of the guys. Veronica yells at them to shut up to approval from all the other cars. Veronica tries to get Cheryl to get a popcorn refill, but she makes Kevin go instead. As he leaves, Veronica notices her mom and FP go behind a building alone. Kevin notices Moose making out with his girlfriend and gets annoyed and orders a bunch of food. The serpent shows up behind him. Hermione meets with FP. He asks where the rest of the money is. She says this was the agreed upon amount. He says, I think we need to talk about your husband. Hermione says, well, as long as Hiram's in jail, you deal with me. And we see Veronica watching nearby. Archie brings Grundy a gift. It's a new cello bow. He says they should end their lessons, even though he doesn't want to. They embrace one last time as Alice, Betty, and Fred barge in. Kevin and the serpent make out. We find out his name is Joaquin. Kevin gives him his number, and Joaquin gets freaked out that he's Sheriff Keller's kid, and Kevin's like, I won't tell my dad if you won't. Alice girls into Grundy and wants to go to Sheriff Keller about this. Archie pleads with them and says he went after her. Not true. Alice tells Betty that she wants her to see what Archie truly is. They all get in a fight, and Archie pleads with Grundy to not hurt her. Archie pleads with Alice to not hurt Grundy. Alice says this is about doing what's right and informing our neighbors. Betty says, if you do, I'll tell people I broke into her car and then everyone will think I snapped, just like Polly. Grundy says she'll quit, and Alice says you have to leave town as well. Fred agrees. Grundy says she'll pack her things and be gone by the morning. The Kellers arrive home to find their door kicked open. All the files for the investigation around are broken into, and the murder wall is torn up. Veronica asks her mom about meeting with FP. Hermione says Hiram had hired the Serpents to cheapen the drive-in land so they could purchase it, and he sunk every last penny into the deal. Veronica's shocked that her dad is a criminal, and Hermione's like, well, did you enjoy living fancy? It was all provided by your dad. Archie and Fred arrive home. Fred tries to console his son, and that it wasn't his fault. Archie cries, and they embrace. Alice tells Betty Polly kept secrets from them and doesn't want them to keep secrets between each other anymore if she's going to keep her safe. Betty tells her that she's not Polly and Archie isn't Jason, so stop using that to control her. Betty looks out her window once Alice leaves at Archie and texts him that she's sorry. He says it's okay, you're trying to help. Betty writes in her diary that says love does crazy things. We see the next day Grundy leaves town in her Lolita glasses as high schoolers pass by and she checks them out. Jughead sits sadly in the projection room as the sun rises and he looks at a photo of him and his sister. We see that he had a cot there and was living inside the drive-in. He graffitis on the side that says Jughead was here.
Jughead Jones, I'm pretty sure. Like, he puts his full name.
FP approaches and asks where he's going to live now, and Jughead says, I'll figure it out, Dad. I always do. The end.
What I think is really interesting about this episode is that there are obvious rights and wrongs from a moral, like, external perspective, but everyone has individual motivations for why they actually do things. And I think that's what makes it really good storytelling.
Mm-hmm. No, like, absolutely.
Even down to like Jughead's dad, like the FP reveal. Like, so is FP like, so FP was, as the Serpents were paid to make the the drive-in.
The Jughead.
Jughead. I was trying to say.
Oh, it is a Jughead Jones.
Exactly. But sorry, the Serpents were paid to make the drive-in like a bad area, like to make it less defendable, so that then the lodges could purchase it. Mm-hmm. And so FP knew his son lived there, it seems, and is also responsible for getting rid of the place that his son calls home. We assume another place his son probably called home was with him, and he is no longer participating in that either. Mm-hmm. And like, what are FP's motivations? Did he do it to try to get Jughead to come to him? Did he do it to try to get Jughead to need him? Is it purely he doesn't care? Like, there's so many. It's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of think, right? And because we don't get his perspective or anything, you kind of wonder what his motivations are a lot, and you kind of assume the worst because of everything else he does this episode. And like, why wouldn't Jughead live with him? We also find out that he was working for Fred Andrews. Yeah, and what happened? Was stealing. Like, so
why was he stealing?
Right, exactly.
What was he stealing for?
Mm-hmm. And we know, obviously they both live in precarious situations, but it makes you start to like broaden it a bit.
And was he stealing materials to help build shelter for his family, or was he stealing materials to sell? Like, what was he pushed to be an active member of the Serpents because there was nowhere else for him to go, or was he already a part of that, and was it already that the Serpents were committing crime?
Right. And obviously he's, in a sense at least, not in a sense, like, but in actuality, he's failed his son for whatever the circumstances are that has provided that Jughead has to live by himself on a cot in like a rundown building at the place that he works. Like, what sort of, like, Jughead now has to look out for himself. And what led to like that situation where FP was no longer the person that could take care of him as the adult in the situation. And
how were Jughead and Archie going on a road trip? Who has a car?
That is very true. We don't see either. Wait, but it seems like
Do you think
maybe
Archie,
Archie kind of runs to Grundy's. I don't know. Maybe Archie has a car, but
but why
they're
does he
always
always
walking.
Yeah,
everywhere.
they're always walking.
Maybe they're gonna borrow
Fred's
truck or something.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, not
Typical high schoolers making plans and they don't even have.
Can either of them drive? Anyway, not the point. I think also Jughead's motivations. Jughead's like, oh, it's my job, it's my livelihood, and he knows that's the version he has to present because he can't call it his home.
Mm-hmm.
But he can refer to it as a home away from home, and he can care about it, but he can't tell the mayor he lives there.
Right.
And where has Jughead been living before this? Has he always lived there since he got that job?
Right. Yeah. When did he leave his home?
Who owns the drive-in and sold it?
Right. Yeah. We don't see any ownership that way, and it seems like he's the kind of sole person running it.
Mm-hmm.
So either very hands off in that sense.
Mm-hmm. The other right and wrong. I mean, there's lots of right. I think the whole episode is kind of themed around right and wrong, and then like individual motivations. I think breaking down the Grundy aspect is really interesting because we have Grundy, who we assume is telling Archie all of this mostly to protect herself. Whether or not her backstory is true, I think is completely irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
It's being used to manipulate a child.
Yes.
And it's presented in that way.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Betty, who honestly has good intentions and wants to help her friend. She's really the only person with good and moral intentions the entire episode. She's kind of our moral compass. Right.
And it plays with too, because like Veronica being there, it's like, are you taking this far because you have feelings for him? Or is it really that you're just like trying to be a good friend to him?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's fun because Betty is going like way above, but it's like, is there more of a motivation behind than you're letting on?
That's true. Yeah, there's totally that. Also, Betty is a CoverGirl ad. Her dresser is a CoverGirl ad for the first, like, it's been multiple episodes now where they pan over the items on her dresser or her vanity.
Betty, you should use red number 5.
And then I know there's certain episodes where they say products. I recall this. So I'm like, okay, we're waiting for that.
Mm-hmm.
I always think it's funny the way they work those in.
Right.
But anyway,
makes me think of the 30 Rock, where it's like, we're not going to do like product placement, and they get into the elevator and there's a guy in the Snapple bottle costume.
Exactly. I think, but yeah, so it's interesting. So we have Betty and her, even if it's because she likes Archie, her why is not necessarily particularly immoral either. It's an individual and selfish motivation, but is it really that selfish to not want your friend to be the victim of a predator?
Yeah.
I guess Jughead really is probably the most balanced on that. And but he doesn't take action.
No, he intentionally says, he's like, I think he calls himself Switzerland or something, that he's not going to get involved in this way.
Yeah, he doesn't tell when Archie's like, "Oh, you told Betty," and he's like, "I didn't tell Betty, and I didn't tell you about Betty because I'm not participating in this," basically.
Yeah, he at least does, like, do you really think that she's like trying to help you out here, or like that she has your best intentions? But Betty is the one to be like, she's cutting you off. And I think that's so important. It's like, because being with her is trapping you in a lie, so then you are cut off from everybody else. Her manipulation of you is creating an island out of everybody you love.
Mm-hmm. And Archie's in such strong denial. But then because Archie always does the right thing, he's like, okay, you know what? Like, I do have to end this, but you have to let me do it in my way. And of course, that's when he gets caught, because, that's how these things work. But the idea that even then he's like, well, we have to end this, but I'm going to buy you this really expensive cello bowstring, and I'm going to sell one of my guitars to do it. It's asinine.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alice busting in to bust the whole situation is super fucked. But Alice is right. But she's not doing it for the right reason at all.
Oh my God.
This is not, I want to protect this child. It is, I want my daughter to see how bad this boy is.
Mm-hmm.
When you're like, he's a victim.
And get a story.
Exactly.
Alice careening from scene to scene in this episode is so good. Like by the time she finds when she's banging on the door of Fred's truck to finding the gun in Betty's drawer.
She's like, it's about the kids.
But yeah, it's that scene is so good where they bust Archie and Grundy because it's exactly what you're talking about of people having the individual motivations all bouncing off one another, because Fred's like, I need to protect my son, and she's like, Betty, you need to see that Archie Andrews is the devil. And then Fred is just like, what the fuck are you saying about my son? And the whole time Archie's like also being like, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, don't do this, like just talking like horrible about himself. And it's really, I didn't include that in the notes because I didn't.
He's victim blaming himself.
Mm-hmm. And then Betty's just trying to protect her friend. Mm-hmm. So like, even when they're kind of doing things that's not in, say morally most way of like trying to protect Archie by protecting Grundy, you understand why she's doing it, because it's this like really horrible situation where her friend's hurting.
Mm-hmm. And she wants to protect Archie, so she's willing to let a predator get away if it means that her friend is okay.
Yeah. And it's so funny coming from...
I guess maybe she isn't really our most moral character in this scenario either. I take that back, what I said about Betty. I mean, she might be the most moral on a sliding scale. I guess exactly. Fred, really.
Fred, yeah.
Fred delivers a very important line when they get back and they're in the truck and Fred opens the door and Archie's in the truck and he's crying or looking sad. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And Fred goes, "It's not your fault." And I'm like, that is a very important line to tell a victim. Like, it is not your fault.
Yeah, it's such a and we talked about the care in the last episode. It's such a beautiful moment of Fred just being gentle, like with his son. And you don't get a lot of, well, I don't know, I get a lot of, but I think it's really like important to get this soft, masculine character.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's not like, I don't think you could talk to Fred Andrews with like proper nouns on like emotional intelligence or something like that. He'd probably look at you like you're crazy, but he's the type of person that embodies it, of like being kind and understanding to other people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. He's too pure.
Mm-hmm. And again, Luke Perry just knocking it out of the park.
He plays that so well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Hermione, Veronica, and Hiram. And we have this, Veronica is also dealing with right and wrong. And this idea that she's the one at the beginning is like, why would anyone hide that they're buying this property? And then realizes she is the family that is buying this property. Mm-hmm. And that her father from jail is still manipulating everybody.
Mm-hmm. And coming to terms with that her father is a criminal. We don't get much of it, but I think it's in the first episode where she kind of throws out like, I stand by my dad. Mm-hmm. And then she's like, oh, like he literally hired people to lower the property value so he could swoop in.
Mm-hmm. And am I a person who's going to like support that and stand by that? And how do I? And I think it makes her character really interesting throughout the show. And this happens a lot as the show goes on. And they do a really good job of kind of like pairing her to her father and her intelligence and her skill set as like much later in the show. And so it's a good kind of like start and a reminder of her motivation for that she's like, oh, I feel betrayed by this almost. Like I thought that my father was a good businessman and like, sure, like I was mean and like I was a rich girl and all of that, but I want to be a better person here. And this is a small town and my mother is acting on my father's behalf in ways that are still criminal, and not criminal in the moral sense, but criminal in the I'm literally stealing, or like I'm stealing from people almost.
Yeah.
I'm reducing the property value so that I can have this.
Yeah, exactly. To keep her lifestyle intact.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's really well done. I always forget this, and no wonder we got like really into it.
Yeah.
I also want to note that like Betty calls Jughead Juggy a lot, and then Jughead calls her Bets a lot. But like you don't really hear anyone else do that.
No, not as much.
Veronica calls her B because they call each other B and V, which makes sense. Like that's from the comics. Yeah, Archiekins. We get one Archibald from someone. I can't remember who it is and in which episode. It might be Cheryl. It might be Cheryl.
Like, I don't remember at all, but I have her voice ringing in my
Archibald, head. Yeah. But I think the way they speak to each other is interesting. Like we've already got Archie calling Veronica Ronnie too.
Right.
He calls her Ronnie. And so it's just like, okay, like here they are in their comfort levels and who's calling who what and like what does that say about them and their closeness?
Right. And how they kind of view each other.
Like Betty calls Kevin Kev, but I don't know if other characters do until later.
I don't know if Veronica does.
I think Archie might later in the show, but
yeah, Veronica might as well. I can't remember though.
But I think it's interesting. I like to pay attention to that and like how characters speak to one another. Because it tells you their closeness and also their, like, if you feel comfortable nicknaming someone and what the nickname is. And if it's different from what other people call them.
Yeah, right.
Because Betty is already a nickname. Her name's Elizabeth.
Right.
It's
we just threw. Yeah, I'm so bad about that, but it threw me in the episode. I'm like, wait, why is she calling her? Oh, when you mentioned that there, I didn't even think of it at the moment. I'm just like, huh? What's going on?
Isn't Polly's real name Pauline or something like that?
Oh, probably.
I can't remember, but regardless, those are my final thoughts on this episode. Do you have any other thoughts?
Kevin's household. Of like
yes.
him having a supportive single father who's the sheriff of the police.
And lets him borrow the truck.
And it's like,
don't you have a cute gay boy to be with instead of
right, instead of cruising? And it's like he understands what his son's doing, and his son, like Kevin is like, oh, we need to tries to. It's funny because Kevin feels like he needs to keep. Well, I understand why he keeps Joaquin a secret, but there is. You would expect that this would be a little different because of the way other characters, like say Moose isn't like out in things, but it's like, oh no, that's a Moose decision. Like Kevin is out and is supported at home. Like this is not like a societal makeup. Like
but
Kevin is accepted.
Is he accepted outside of our bubble?
Oh,
and this
fair.
is a blue collar small town. Like I grew up in one of those. I had gay friends, a lot of whom weren't out. You know what I mean? It really depended. And even if they were out, some of them weren't out to their families, but they were out publicly. And some of them were out to their families, but weren't out publicly. And it just really depends on the dynamic. So I think this really highlights that when you're not in a city and you're in a smaller area where everyone knows everyone, like it's harder to live your truth, and it's harder, especially if you feel like you are in the minority.
Right. No. Okay. That's a really good point. But I thought it was I don't know.
I think there's more to it with the cruising plotline. Like the reason why the cruising plotline it comes more in season 2 exists in this show has to do with the fact that like when you're in a city, it's easier to find other people to hook up with.
Right.
But when you're in a small town and half of the town is closeted, you have to do things that are sketchier to scratch that itch.
Right. And I like that Sheriff Keller knows his son goes, and so it's like, just don't do that. There's a killer on the loose. I don't want you hurt.
Exactly.
It's like that's a.
Can't you find a nice boy to hook up with at home?
Exactly. It's so funny. It was just caught me flabbergasted, like caught me off guard. I was like, oh, it's just like he's just supportive as hell. Yeah,
I like that, and I think it's to have the sheriff be that way is really fun and interesting.
Yeah. Also, kind of a soft masculine character. How strange.
A lot of soft masculine characters in the show.
Maybe a little bit fantastical the more we know about police, but I mean, nice in real life, but nice to say.
One of the notes I wrote down is that like I really like I would love to live in the alternative reality that is Riverdale. Like I really love a story, whether it be a show, a book, anything that is it is our modern time or close to our modern time, but like in a slightly different with one twist. So like for example, like I watched The West Wing, so the presidents aren't necessarily like there are the same presidents up until you get to the current one, or whatever. Right, I don't necessarily know if the president before Bartlett is also fake. I can't remember like who he followed. And the elections are like 98 to 2002 instead of like 2000 to 2004. Like it's just it's one little shift that lets you stay in our reality and believe in this world, but also creates a playground for you where you're not using real people.
Yeah.
And I really like a story like this that does this because I think that it gives you more freedom. And especially when this doesn't necessarily have magic or paranormal or anything right now in its current iteration. But in a story that then plays with more fantasy elements, it's a lot better to have a world like that that's more open.
Yeah, that's true.
But I really love a world like this where it's like, okay, it's our world, but
It's like we can talk about modern things, but also have these like heightened things of
like a parallel universe.
Exactly, of kids doing investigations into the murder of friends or secrets that are going on in the town.
It allows you to suspend more belief, I feel.
Yeah.
And I think
absolutely.
if they'd done that with Pretty Little Liars really clearly, it would have been easier to believe that endless couple months there between November, the never-ending November, from the Halloween train to when the A stole Christmas.
2 seasons. God. And then just the other thing that'll tie into both episodes, again, I think it's really fun. Again, the YA genre conventions we talked about last time, but the other thing of the parents aren't capable of understanding the full scope of like really what's going on here. So the kids are doing the investigations and have to do things themselves, even if they are in, a lot of the homes are like kind of fractured and things, also kind of YA things of like parents just don't understand, but also even in like Archie's case of Fred wouldn't like want to rock the boat or do things in the way they do. So they kind of like fall on these things. So.
I also think it's interesting because by the time you hit high school, parenting is almost done. And those years are still important. They're very important, but your kid is who they are. And so when parents then try to enforce or like Alice is trying to change Betty.
Yes.
She's trying to mold Betty into something because of what happened with Polly. And it's like, but Betty is Betty and Betty has always been Betty, and Betty may change, like, and Betty may have been fawning to make you happy for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't change a 15-year-old.
No.
Like it's just not going to work in the same way.
Yeah.
And that's not saying that you don't, if they're doing something dangerous, you don't prevent that or, put your best effort into keeping them safe.
Yeah.
But it's just a different mentality. Like, yeah, it's very different. I always think it's weird when parents get really hard on their kids in high school. And I saw something online where someone was talking about how in high school, their mother would go around telling everyone like, oh, my daughter is so easy to raise. She is the best behaved teenager. And it was because she had read a parenting book that said that when you present like that, your child wants to maintain that. It gives you the expectation. So you're like, well, I don't want to disappoint my parents, which of course there's lots of nuance in that, but you want to continue to be that. Whereas like the parents that walk around saying their kid is awful, their kid is bad, your kid won't behave, your kid is snarky, like it just makes them more irritable because you're being told you're not enough.
Yeah. When you support your kid, they're more likely to want to do things or not want to do things, but they feel better and are able to do things in a more positive way. Whereas if you scold them and try and restrict things, then they're going to lash out.
I even think about like in junior high, like everyone's like, oh, like junior high and high school kids are miserable and they're mean and they're moody. And so like I was probably meaner and moodier because I was told that I was mean and moody. And I was like, oh, you want to see mean and moody?
Right.
I'll bring it. And that's not to say that kids aren't. They are kids. Like,
But I think to your point of that they, not that you're done parenting, but the kids are kind of fully formed in that sense. It's you kind of have to treat them with a bit more respect and trust that way, because think of like you don't like being like told what to do or like caged in, and they think of themselves as full real people even though they're still developing that way. So how can you put up guardrails rather than trying to like shut them down?
Well, and they're gonna be full adults before they're done developing. Yeah. I think that's the other really important aspect is like you become a legal adult at 18, your brain is not done cooking. And so you have to have parameters for how you live your life at that age without you're literally missing some stuff.
Some gray matter.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you trust your kid and you teach your kid, you trust them. So I really like I think the Kevin and Sheriff Keller relationship really highlights that because he's like, I know you do this. This is what you do. Like, I'm treating you basically like a young adult.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's asking to use his car. You know what I mean? Like there's still that parent-child relationship, but it's very much like I trust you to not do this because it's dangerous and I'm giving you a why.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see.
And it's not dangerous because, oh, you want to go have sex with people. It's dangerous because there's a murderer out.
Right.
Which is an important aspect of that.
Uh-huh. And it's interesting, at least so far, that we look at the two shining examples that we talk about are both fathers. Whereas a lot of the negative things that we've seen in this episode with Alice, and then especially next episode, are mothers. So there's something going on there. So that's interesting.
I mean, it's probably misogyny.
Probably. So, something to flag. Anyways, next episode?
Next episode.
All right, Chapter 5, Heart of Darkness. We get outside shots of Thornhill, the Blossom family manor, accompanied with Jughead's narration. Again, this is a part where it just looks so good. We get these like outside shots of this creepy manor and like all these empty places, like this empty pool. There's like a cemetery on the premises. This old, it like looks so gothic.
They've updated it from the pilot. The pilot has, remember I was like, oh, that's not Cheryl's house.
So we get the outside shots accompanied with Jughead's narration. We then see Cheryl walking through the house in an all red dress in the dark, carrying a candlestick. Incredible. We put it up on the blue sky because it's so good.
It's such a good scene. I love it. I want to be Cheryl.
Absolutely. She walks through the house with candles towards Jason's coffin. She opens the coffin to find blood but no body. She turns around to find Jason zombified. She wakes up from her nightmare and finds her mom outside the room. Her Penelope tells her that's her mom, told her that no more sleeping in Jason's bed and tells her that she won't be speaking at Jason's memorial. Archie boxes on his punching bag. Fred comes in. We now find out that Archie's going all in on football and giving up on music because he, reasons that it'll get him a scholarship. Kevin recreates the murder board with Betty and Jughead in the blue and gold room and says the break-in stole all the police and audio tapes for police interviews. A boy comes in named Trev to make sure him and Betty are still going on for their date that night. Kevin wonders if her mom knows about this, and Betty says that she's out of town. So Alice missed not appearing in this episode. Betty says it's not a date. Betty says it's not a date. It's an intelligence gathering mission, and they can interview the students. It's football practice, and Archie gets blown up by the defense. Coach gets mad at him, even though the line missed the block. Why is he getting tackled behind the line? And that's his fault. After the coach tells him and Reggie that they have a week to compete for captain. Fred picks up his meal from Pops, and he asks Hermione out to dinner. She turns him down, and he asks, well, what the drive-in was? And then she doesn't really answer, so he figures out that it wasn't a date and leaves her as Hermione looks sad. Veronica, Archie, Jughead, Kevin, and Betty catch up. Archie says he's all back in on football. Valerie, Valerie Brown, one of the Pussycats, comes in and says she told her music coach about it and gives him his number to call. Betty says now you can't avoid music. Cheryl comes over with invites to Jason's memorial. I couldn't tell if she was annoyed because Jughead shows up. I think she's annoyed that Jughead was on the invite list of like, you gross pores.
I didn't think she gave him an invitation.
Yeah, I couldn't tell because it did look like she was pointing to Veronica. Yeah. Oh, I did write a quote here because Veronica comes up to Archie and says, how is it like living PG, post Grundy? Too soon?
Veronica has some really great zingers.
Veronica stops Cheryl in the halls, offering an olive branch. Cheryl invites her to a sleepover at her house that night before the memorial. Archie ponders football and music and calls the coach. Archie, the music coach, and meets with him. He's a man named Oscar. Oscar tells him about that he has to work harder and put more time into his music. He has to see Archie's sheet music, and Archie doesn't have any, but Archie says he can put them together, and so Oscar's like, yeah, give them to me by tomorrow. Penelope and Clifford Blossom, the matriarch and patriarch of the Blossom family, tour Sheriff Keller through Thornhill ahead of the memorial and say that people are coming after the founding families in Riverdale. Oh, they're coming after us, the rich. They wonder if Jason's murderer will be at the memorial. And then Cheryl comes in and is like, so that's why you invited everybody, like including the lodges. Trev and Betty have their date. She asks about Jason. He tells her that he started acting weird and secretive a few months ago, and Trev thought it was about Polly. They stopped hanging out together, and he said that Jason was selling all his stuff and was supposedly dealing drugs. This started after Jason and Polly got together. Archie and Valerie work on writing his music down as sheet music. Fred comes into his room and accidentally interrupts him and is like, acts all awkward, and then also says that he's a big fan of the Pussycats, and then Fred shows himself out. And it's really funny and cute because he goes, I'm going to close this door, but not all the way.
Yeah. It's such a dad thing.
It really is. It's so good. Betty goes out and sees her dad working on the car. She asks him about Polly and what happened. Hal says Jason and Polly had a fight, but afterwards Polly was devastated. He came home one day and found Polly tried to kill herself, and that's why she was sent away. Betty tells Jughead the next day she wanted to call Polly, but supposedly she had a big setback when she heard about Jason. She had a big setback when she heard about Jason. They wonder why Jason had to run away. Jughead wants to investigate his bedroom. Archie is at football practice and finds that his notes that he wrote on his arm about the plays rubbed off, so he runs the plays wrong, gets blown up by Reggie, and we get a montage of Archie fucking up until he makes a big play downfield. His hand hurts, and Reggie tells him to sit it out, and Archie's like, "Oh, you're just trying to beat me for captain. Well, I'll show you." And Reggie's like, "I was just trying to help you." Veronica finds Archie in the hall trying to wrap his own hand and goes to help. It's apparently his playing hand. He feels bad because he was up late working on his songs with Valerie, and she acts playfully jealous. Archie meets with Oscar. He calls his sheet music sloppy and thinks his songs are juvenile and repetitive, and he's like, "I don't think I can work with you." Veronica's over for the Blossom family.
Meanwhile, he was like 15.
I know, it's rude as hell.
No, the Blossom twins are 17 because it says at the very first episode that Jason is 17.
So maybe they are a little older?
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll have to track this down.
I don't think anyone has good answers.
Oh, okay.
From
Because
what I
it's kinda
understand,
out
it's
of
like,
time.
yeah, it's like, well, Jughead's 16 when the show starts and like the Blossom twins are 17. So are they a year older or?
Yeah, are they not in the same? Interesting. But they're in the same class, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I took classes with upperclassmen,
That's
but
true.
I don't imagine Cheryl not doing well enough to be with her own. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Veronica's over for the Blossom family dinner. She's the only person over for the sleepover. Mama Blossom acts mean, Penelope acts mean to her. We get to meet Nana Rose, the creepy older matriarch of the Blossom family.
Obsessed with Nana Rose.
Oh, she's so good.
10 out of 10.
Clifford mentions that Riverdale was founded on the maple syrup industry. He asks about Hiram getting arrested and the publicity. Veronica says she didn't get to say goodbye, and that's nice that you get to say goodbye to Jason. And then Penelope says, well, some of us already did when they rode him across the river to his death. Hermione is alone at Pop's, closing up when she hears someone out front. She finds a box and opens the lid to find a rattlesnake. Betty sneaks downstairs after hearing noises in the middle of the night and finds her dad up late watching home movies of Polly. Veronica and Cheryl, when she was a child. Veronica and Cheryl look through old photos of Jason. Veronica asks why invite her over, and Cheryl says, because you helped me. Veronica asks why she wants to make a speech at the memorial, and Cheryl says she wants to say she's sorry and that he deserved a better family. Veronica's like, well, I'll definitely help you. And Cheryl's like, no, don't. They'll, like, my parents will kill me. Fred helped Hermione throw out the rattlesnake, and she says it was a message from the serpents and didn't call the police because she doesn't trust them. Fair. And tells him about Hiram owing them money. Fred offers to help her, but she shuts him down. The day of the memorial, Hermione gives her condolences to Penelope, and Penelope brings her in close, and it's just like, you think you're so smart offering your pity. You came to gloat with regards from your husband, and then pushes her away.
And he's like, what the fuck?
What the hell is happening? Penelope is scary. Archie brings Penelope Jason's jersey. She says she starts to get lost in the moment, thinking that Archie looks so much like Jason, but then catches herself and thanks him. Veronica comes over to sit by them, and Betty notices her dad talking to Clifford. And Cheryl comes in wearing all white clothes she wore when Jason disappeared with a white veil. Kevin literally goes, yes. And that is everyone.
And this whole scene, when they pan to Kevin, he's just smiling. Like, he is just having the time of his life. And I think Kevin is our insert character as the audience.
100%, because it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And she goes up front to give a speech. Penelope goes to get up and stop her, and Veronica literally looks over her and tells her to sit down. Cheryl talks about her and Jason and how he was kind and protected her, and how she regrets not protecting him. And also, like, it tells this really sad story about how they used to have she had insisted they have separate birthday parties when they were younger, but then he eventually told her that they should put them together because he had figured out that no one wanted to come to her birthday party.
Yeah, she wanted to separate their birthdays and he refused because he was like,
no one will come. It's really sad.
Yeah.
She cries over his casket for failing him, and Veronica goes to comfort her. Hermione stops Fred to talk afterwards. He offers her the bookkeeping position at his company. She hugs him, and they get awkward. Jughead and Betty go to explore Jason's room. As they rummage through things, they find Nana Rose sitting in the corner. She looks at Betty and says, "Oh, it's you. Lovely to see you again." She's like, "Polly, come closer." And looks at her hand and says, "Of course you're not wearing the ring. That ring has been in the Blossom family for generations. Keep it close and don't tell Penelope I gave it to you. Your wedding was the last thing I was living for. You lost the love of your life, poor child." Penelope drags Cheryl into her room. She tells her after tonight no more river vixens, and if she could, she would ship her off to a boarding school in Europe, but no one would take her. Veronica peeks around the door. Archie vents to Val about at Pops about getting rejected by Oscar, and she tells him that it's hard being rejected, but like, I know it's Oscar telling you that, but you have to be able to push through, essentially. You're the one holding yourself back. Betty and Hal are back at home. She tells him that Jason and Polly were engaged, and she finds out that he knew about this. She asks if that's what him and Clifford were talking about. He says they were arguing because they came close, back in the past, the Blossoms came close to destroying the Coopers. Cheryl's great-grandfather murdered Betty's great-grandfather. They were in business together, selling and trading maple syrup, and the Blossoms wanted it all for themselves. Hal said he would die before he lets them steal his daughter, too. Betty asks where Polly is, and he tells her she's sick. Jason made her that way, and she won't come home until she isn't. Veronica vents to her mom about Cheryl's horrible life and thanks her mom for being there for her. Hermione says, "I need to tell you about what happened last night at Pops." Coach gathers Reggie and Archie and announces that Archie is the captain. "Archie, we had a montage of you just eating shit out on that football field. But let me tell you, you showed a lot of heart out there, and that's what makes a captain." And then Archie's like, "I can't because I also have another love. It's called music. And then the football team deserves a captain who knows only football." And Reggie's like, "Yeah, that's me. I love football." And Archie's like, "I've got to do other things too." Penelope buries Jason with Nana Rose watching and Cheryl watching from far away. Jughead and Betty catch up later on all the secrets. Jughead wonders how far Hal would go to protect Polly. She says whoever stole all the evidence from Sheriff Keller's wasn't at the drive-in, and we see Hal with all the files. And then they add the Coopers to the murder board, and Jughead says they need to talk to Polly. The end.
Okay. First and foremost, where are all the upperclassmen at this school? I will ask this every episode. If Cheryl is the head of the River Vixens and Archie's running for football captain.
You know, it's a flat structure. It's a commune school.
Okay. Fred is so blue collar right down to his plaid dress shirt under his little suit. I
pointed this out. It's
love
so
this scene. I think fashion is very important in this show and the way they dress the characters. And so I really love this detail that Fred he's not wearing a tie, and then he's wearing a like dark blue but like a plaid dress shirt underneath his like, you know, like not a formal suit. Like, I mean, it's a formal suit, it's a suit, but like
he's like dressing up, but he's not wearing like
a tuxedo or anything.
Yeah,
not that I think you'd wear a tux to a funeral, but
a suit. I understand what you're talking about.
Okay. The Cheryl walking in all white while everyone else is in all black. So good. So beautiful. So amazing. And the implication one that it was what she was wearing when he ran away, the last thing she was wearing when she saw him, but also this idea that like everyone else is dark and she is the one being like liberated by this, or like she is the angel. Like there's lots of ways to play with the like light and darkness of the fashion choices of this that I really like. And I think it's really fun because it's not necessarily Cheryl. It's Cheryl intentionally calling attention to herself, but not because she wants attention from everybody, but because she wants to be validated in her mourning and her feelings.
Yeah. And I think also she wants to be forgiven. I think I hadn't thought about
the purity aspect of it.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about her as like the angel. Like that's a really good call out there. So I think connecting those pieces of I want to be essentially in that same way of like in the Catholic sense, like to be able to go to heaven and not like purgatory and things. It's like to come to terms and be forgiven for all the actions you committed, for all the sins you committed as a human. And so I think that ties in really well here to kind of that point you made of kind of being an angel of like, I want to move on like my brother into heaven.
And that she sees her brother as an angel, and he's always in white because that's what he was wearing when she last saw him. So like even though she had a dream of him being a zombie, you know.
Exactly. That's her mixed feelings kind of creeping up there. Her
guilt.
And brought on by her extremely abusive family situation.
Yes.
Her father's non-existent, and her
with
mother,
his weird wig. Has a questionable
really
wig.
bad. It's really bad. It's like high up. You can kind of see it. And it kind of like lifts off. It's got a lot of volume. And her mom is Penelope is incredibly scary and abusive. She's not fun in the way the other like heightened characters are. She can be in certain scenes, but she is at least probably one of the most emotionally abusive characters on this show. It's
yes.
truly horrifying.
Yes. Oscar Castillo, I forgot he existed. I assume he only happens in this one episode.
Yeah,
I don't remember anything about him.
But he's so mean.
And it's such like a weird plot point. Like, I don't know if it was necessary. Like, I think it was necessary to show Archie being like, I'm not doing music because it's associated with her. But I don't necessarily know if then, like, he didn't need that to have his confidence rocked.
No.
It was kind of just, it felt like a waste of a scene.
Yeah.
Which is odd because I don't feel like there's a lot of fat on these episodes, but I do feel like that it wasn't necessarily like helpful for the plot.
No. Because we get it through football. I think you could have just done it with like prioritizing football between it or Valerie, who like is someone who believes in him, and potentially some sort of romantic interest there too.
That scene. So when Fred walks in and sees them together, and Fred is happy. Is Fred happy because his son is with a girl his own age, or is Fred happy because Archie is playing music again?
I think you called that out. Wow, damn. Yeah, you called that at the time, like, oh, he's with someone age appropriate. I think it's kind of both. It's like, oh, my son's doing he's a teen. He's being a kid. And like following a passion, but also like with his peers. So I think that's a really good point also of the music.
Yeah, because he's been sad or obsessive about just football, and he hasn't been doing music, which is a huge part of him. And he's expressed to his dad that this is a huge part of him. So then for him to abandon that part of him probably made Fred go, oh.
Yeah.
Because he's actually an attentive parent.
Yes.
He's like, I know when you sneak out.
Right. And I just let you go do your thing because I trust you. But like.
If you've seen the show before, there's some really good foreshadowing in the dinner scene with Veronica at the Blossom household. That's all I'm going to say about that. If you have not seen the show, there's some really good foreshadowing in that scene.
Yeah. It's a future plotline stuff. It's real interesting. It was good. I was like, oh, wow.
It makes me wonder if another plotline was planned from the beginning, or if that character's plotline was simply we need a solution for this mystery. And it's a plotline in this. The second thing I'm talking about is a plotline in season 2. That character is prominent in this episode, kind of.
Right.
And I'm not certain.
Yeah.
And if you've seen the show, you'll understand that. And if you don't, I'm so sorry. And we will continue on. But you will learn soon enough.
That's true.
I don't know about that one, but I know the other one is that's intentional foreshadowing.
Yeah. I won't say any more, but that is food for thought.
I think the theme of this episode is really unearthing secrets, except for Archie. Archie's is like, he's in like a healing arc.
Right.
But
he's in his own show of trying to, again, balance his life.
It's really Betty kind of unearthing secrets. And Betty realizing that, one, Polly was engaged. Polly was suicidal. Jason was acting weird. Like, when he was with Polly, what does that mean? Was he selling drugs? Why would a rich kid sell drugs? Was he just selling his stuff because he wanted to get away? Because we know that from Cheryl.
Right.
And then he just wanted to get away. We don't really know why. And then I was thinking about how, also the maple syrup family murder drama.
Right.
And Betty makes a comment to Jughead at one point that it's like, oh, I don't know if I can't trust my parents because they're not telling me the truth, which is so interesting because in the last episode we have Alice being like, there can be no secrets between us, but it's like, well, you're holding on to all this information and not telling me.
Glass house, Alice.
And so I really like Betty already doesn't necessarily trust her parents, and especially not her mom, but like watching the relationship kind of crumble is really interesting.
Yeah. And I think the important shift in this episode too is that we have, as I mentioned in the last episode, it's like the manipulators have been the mothers, but in the Cooper house, we start to get some shades there where it's like, oh, even though he's been quiet in these 5 episodes so far, he's much more active in controlling the house than we understand. Like him saying that Polly is sick and won't come home until she's cured puts the entire it puts the entire thing of like what's going on with Polly in question, because it's like, is Polly actually sick, and is she actually being cared for, or is he stowing her away because he wants her to act a certain way, i.e. not involved with the Blossoms?
Mm-hmm.
And there's you get the idea that it's like it could be way more abusive coming from Hal than this concerned father that we kind of get, where he's like watching home videos and things, and Betty's going, oh my God, it's so sad. But it's like he's harboring these deep grudges that he's taking out on his kids, and that we presumed was just Alice, because Alice has been vocalizing this, but he's been quiet when she said a lot of these things over the last time. So I like that that's shifting, like the dynamics of what's going on in the Cooper household.
He's also watching videos of young Polly, and children are easier to control than teenagers and adults.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like Alice has a lot more issues with Betty now that she's older. Like, it doesn't seem like they had this kind of friction before, or else I think it'd be more resolved, or at least like there'd be a system to it.
Right.
And so it's very interesting. It seems like the Coopers feel like they're losing control of their daughters as they become adults, but it's because, like, as parents, you have to start loosening control of your children as they become adults.
Mm-hmm. And we get a fun twist we find out that Jason and Polly were Romeo and Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
Literally.
And Nana Rose was the friar or whatever. Who was it that helped them?
Uh-huh. Is that Friar Tuck or something?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either. Oh, Nana Rose. What a character.
Nana Rose is amazing. The other character who gets secrets revealed in front of them is Veronica, and seeing how Cheryl is treated by her family. And I think they're really good foils for each other, because they're both rich girls with very strange relationships with their parents and being manipulated by their parents, but not necessarily in the same way or through the same means. And I think Veronica watching Cheryl stand up to her parents, with Cheryl having told her, oh, they'll kill me, like knowing she's going to get in trouble and doing it anyway, like, is that inspirational to Veronica to stand up to her parents? Does that kind of set it in her mind, oh, wait, I can do this too?
Right. And kind of continue down that path that she's already on. Because she is being... Because even when she is kind of bamboozled into being the only person at the sleepover at the Blossom house, she really wants to help Cheryl. Like, she is truly a kind person that's trying to help out there. So will that kind of, this experience help push her to go against a lot of the things that her parents are okay with and stand for?
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting. It's good.
That's what I got for you today. Any final thoughts from you?
Is there anything? I don't think there's anything else for these episodes. They're just good times. Let me tell you, having a great time still.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm really glad we're enjoying this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a great decision.
Good.
All right. So you can find this podcast, if you're listening to the video version, it's on YouTube, or watching the video version, you could be listening to, at dead_ends on YouTube. You can also find this on all your audio podcast platforms of choice at Dead Ends. You can find us on Blue Sky, where you'll see me post every now and then, see us post. And that's at dead-ends. And you can also drop a comment or something if you have questions or want to talk about the episode. We're happy. We love talking to people about the shows in the comments. Or you can send us an email to deadendspcast@gmail.com. And also, let your friends know about us. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give us 5 stars on all your podcast platforms of choice. It helps us out.
Well,
that's it.
I don't fit in. Oh, we don't fit in, actually. I don't fit in. I was being Jughead, but
like
we haven't gotten there yet. It'll be in a couple episodes. Maybe give it a couple more weeks.
Yeah, we'll be there.
We don't fit in.
We're not gonna fit in.
And we love you very much.
And have a happy holidays, and see you in the new year.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Love you.